What happens when one small act of innocent comfort at the lake becomes the spark for public humiliation, quiet revenge, and a lawful ending? Why did he stay calm while I told everyone he overreacted, only to let the truth land in front of them all? Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. I never thought a single afternoon by the lake could change everything. I've always believed I was a good person, fun, charming, careful with my heart, but maybe a little restless in love. 6 months ago, I thought my relationship with Evan was perfect. Calm, thoughtful, attentive. The kind of man who makes you feel safe, even when life is messy. And yet, somehow, I convinced myself that I deserved more excitement, more attention, and maybe a little thrill. That day by the lake, when Callum, my ex, draped his jacket over my shoulders because I shivered, it felt like a harmless moment. Friendly, innocent. But Evan's reaction, his quiet observation, his folded arms, the subtle tension, stayed with me in ways I didn't expect. I laughed it off to everyone else. Told my friends it was nothing, a joke even. They nodded, agreed, and encouraged me to enjoy life. I told myself the same. But Evan was not laughing. His silence, his careful distance, and the little reminders of his presence started to feel like a puzzle I couldn't solve. Looking back now, I realized that my small act of comfort at the lake was the first step in a chain of events I thought I controlled. But I didn't. I'm Liora, and I swear, I didn't mean for anything to happen that day by the lake. It was supposed to be easy, just a little get-together with our old college friends before summer ended. Evan had packed sandwiches, drinks, and that faded blue blanket we always used for picnics. He even made sure to bring sunscreen because he knows I always forget. Everything was normal, calm, predictable. Maybe that was the problem. The lake was glowing in the afternoon light, all gold and silver ripples. Tess and her boyfriend were setting up near the dock, playing their music too loud, and everyone was laughing. That's when Callum showed up. I hadn't seen him in years. He looked almost the same, tanned, a little scruffy, guitar case slung over his shoulder. He waved like we were still close friends, and I waved back before thinking. Evan glanced at me but said nothing. He rarely does when he's thinking too much. Callum sat down beside me like it was the most natural thing in the world. He started talking about how he'd just finished a small tour, how he missed this lake, how I hadn't changed at all. I laughed, maybe too loudly. Evan was a few feet away, spreading out the blanket, careful as always, the kind of careful that makes people roll their eyes. Callum noticed. He whispered that Evan still acted like a camp counselor. I told him not to be mean, but I smiled anyway. It was hot, the kind of heat that clings to your skin. Someone opened a cooler, and the smell of soda and sunscreen mixed in the air. I brushed hair from my face, said I was fine, but Callum noticed the goosebumps on my arms and took off his jacket without asking. It was that same brown one I used to steal from him back when we dated. I told him I didn't need it. He said he remembered how easily I got cold and just draped it over my shoulders. I didn't stop him. When I looked up, Evan was standing still, not glaring, not angry, just watching. That unreadable face of his, the one that makes you think he's analyzing the weather while the world burns around him. Tess teased him to come join the fun, but he only nodded. He folded the blanket again, even though it was already flat, and said he was going to get ice from the car. I called after him that we had enough, but he didn't answer. Everyone started joking about the jacket. Tess said it was cute, Mara looked uncomfortable, and someone snapped a photo. I laughed it off, said it was just nostalgia, nothing more. But inside, I liked the attention. For once, people were looking at me, not at quiet, reliable Evan. When Evan came back, he had that polite smile plastered on his face. He handed drinks to everyone, including Callum. I thought he'd make a scene, Maybe say something sharp, but he didn't. He sat down beside me, close enough that I could feel the distance. His knee brushed mine once, then not again. He asked if I was cold. I said no. He nodded, eyes on the lake. Tess turned the music down and started talking about old college memories. Someone brought up that concert we all went to years ago, and Callum grinned, saying I was the one who convinced him to jump into the lake afterward. Everyone laughed, and I played along. I saw Evan's jaw move slightly, like he wanted to speak but changed his mind. That silence of his, it can feel heavier than shouting. When the sun started sinking, people packed up. Callum offered to walk me to the parking lot. Evan said he'd carry the cooler, his voice steady, almost bored. Callum joked that Evan was too serious, that he needed to lighten up. I said Evan just preferred quiet moments. Evan didn't react. He just closed the cooler lid, latched it, and looked out at the water one last time. I thought the tension would fade once we got home, but it didn't. In the car, Evan drove with both hands on the wheel, eyes fixed on the road. I tried to fill the silence with small talk, saying it was nice seeing everyone again. He said it was. I said Callum had changed a lot. He said nothing. I asked if he was angry. He said he wasn't. I told him he was lying. He said quietly, "I don't lie." That shut me up for a while. At one point, my phone buzzed with a message from Tess. Just a picture of me wearing Callum's jacket, captioned throwback vibes. I laughed and showed it to Evan, trying to make light of it. He glanced at it once and said, "You should tell your friends not to post personal moments." I said it wasn't personal. It was funny. He said, "To who?" When we got home, the apartment felt cold. I hung the jacket on the chair, meaning to give it back later. Evan started unpacking without a word. I asked if he wanted dinner. He said he wasn't hungry. I tried to joke, said he was acting like I'd done something awful. He looked at me for a long moment, not angry, just distant. Then he said, "Maybe you should think about why you find it funny." I rolled my eyes. "You're overreacting." "Maybe," he said. He went to his desk, opened his laptop, and a faint blue light filled the room. I heard the soft click of typing, the kind that sounds too deliberate to be work. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Just catching up." I told him to relax. He didn't answer. Later that night, when I walked past his desk, I saw his screen for a second. A calendar window was open. Tomorrow had a small grey block titled Downtown 9:25 a.m. I almost asked what it was, but something about the precision stopped me. Evan never schedules anything that neatly. I told myself it was just a work meeting. Still, I couldn't stop looking at that tiny grey square glowing on his screen. Before bed, he locked his phone and placed it face down on the nightstand. That was new. Usually, he'd scroll for a bit beside me. I teased him for being secretive. He said, "Some things deserve quiet." I turned off the light, telling myself it would blow over. He'd forget, or I'd apologize enough to make him smile again. But as I lay there, I kept thinking about the way he folded that jacket at the lake before leaving, how his eyes never looked angry, just resigned. I thought his calm meant forgiveness. I didn't realize it meant distance. I didn't realize that while I was laughing off the whole thing, he was taking notes in silence, recording the kind of truth I refused to see. The next morning, when I woke up, the coffee machine was already off and 2 mugs sat on the counter, his clean, mine still half full. The smell of toner drifted faintly from his desk in the corner. I told myself he'd gone for a run, but his shoes were still by the door, perfectly lined up, pointing toward the street. I stood there for a long time, feeling that jacket still hanging over the chair, the one that wasn't his. The apartment felt different, tidy, quiet, deliberate. I told myself he was just sulking, that he'd get over it, that I was still in control of the story. I picked up my phone and scrolled through the photos from yesterday, stopping on the one where I'm laughing, Callum's jacket around me, Evan blurred in the background. The caption from Tess read, Still got it. I smiled, typed back a heart emoji, and pressed post. Somewhere outside, I heard a car start. I looked through the window, but by the time I reached it, the street was empty. The only sound left was the echo of that engine fading, and the faint buzz from the coffee maker cooling down. I told myself everything was fine. I still believed it then. The next few days felt heavier than I expected. Evan was polite but colder, like every word passed through a filter before reaching me. He still made coffee in the mornings and folded his shirts perfectly, but we'd stopped talking about anything real. I told myself I was fine with that. I didn't like awkward silences, so I filled them with noise, music, texts, laughter, anything to drown out the stillness between us. Tess called the next afternoon, already buzzing with excitement. "You're kind of trending," she said, laughing. My stomach dropped. She explained that someone had reposted the photo from the lake, the one with Callum's jacket on my shoulders. People from our college group had been sharing it around with funny captions. "You two still have chemistry," someone commented. Another person tagged Evan and wrote, "Chill, bro, it's just a jacket." I tried to laugh along. I said the internet was dumb, that people read too much into everything. Tess said the picture made me look confident, like I was finally loosening up. She told me to own it. I said maybe I would. The truth was, I didn't want Evan to see it, but a small part of me wanted him to. Maybe then he'd realize what he was risking by pulling away. When Evan got home that evening, he placed his bag by the door like always. He asked if I'd eaten. I said I had. Then silence again. I tried to show him the picture, pretending to be amused. "Look, we went viral," I said. He looked at the screen for a second, then at me. "Did you post this?" I told him it was Tess, that it wasn't serious. He nodded, said he wasn't surprised. That tone, flat, almost gentle, annoyed me more than anger ever could. I told him he was acting like I cheated. He said, "You act like you didn't." I asked what that meant. He said, "You know what it looks like to everyone else." I snapped that I didn't live my life for everyone else. He said, "No, just for attention." Then he picked up his jacket and went for a walk. I spent the next hour scrolling through the comments again. Some were harmless, some not. One of Callum's friends had added a little flame emoji under the photo. Another said, "Still sparks after all these years." I should have deleted it. Instead, I liked it. The next morning, Evan left early. I saw his laptop still open on the desk. I only meant to close it, but the screen flickered awake. His calendar was up again. The same neat grey blocks, a few marked meeting, personal. I frowned. Evan never scheduled personal anything. He's the type who forgets to buy birthday cards until the last minute. Now suddenly his week looked planned down to the hour. I brushed it off. Maybe he was finally taking that finance course he mentioned last year. Later that day, Tess texted that she and some friends were meeting for coffee. I joined them, mostly to prove I wasn't hiding from the whole jacket thing. They were already giggling when I arrived. Tess showed me a meme someone made, me wrapped in Callum's jacket, with the caption "Modern chivalry isn't dead." They thought it was hilarious. I forced a smile. One of them asked if Evan was mad. I said he was sulking, that he took things too seriously. They laughed, calling him Mr. Spreadsheet. I laughed too, even though it felt wrong. But laughing was easier than explaining that my boyfriend's silence scared me more than his anger ever could. Halfway through coffee, my phone buzzed. It was Evan. Just one message. "Can you send me the utility statement from last month?" No greeting, no emoji, just plain words. I sent it. A minute later, he replied, "Thanks." That was it. When I got home, he was at his desk again, headphones on, typing. I leaned on the doorway. "You're really into work lately," I said. He looked up briefly. "Something like that." I asked what kind of something. He smiled faintly. "Just organizing." There was a faint smell of printer ink in the air. I saw a single sheet sticking out of the tray. It looked blank from where I stood. He noticed me looking. Ran out of toner, he said. I'll fix it later. I told him he was turning into a machine. He said machines at least finish what they start. That night, I called my mum. I wanted someone to agree with me. She did, of course. She said men like Evan always overreact, that a confident woman scares them. He'll come around, she said. Don't let him guilt you. That was exactly what I wanted to hear. Still, something felt off when I hung up. I walked into the kitchen for water and saw 2 mugs again. His washed, mine half empty. The pattern was starting to annoy me. It felt like he was doing it on purpose, just to remind me how neat he was, how responsible. I dumped my mug in the sink without rinsing it, out of spite. The next day, at lunch, Tess showed me another post. Someone had tagged Callum this time. He'd commented with a laughing emoji. I should have ignored it, but instead I replied with a playful, "Old habits die hard." Within an hour, it had a dozen likes. I told myself it didn't mean anything. It was just nostalgia. That evening, Evan walked in while I was scrolling. I turned the screen away, not because I was hiding anything, at least that's what I told myself, but because I didn't want another lecture. He hung his keys on the hook, opened the fridge, and took out a bottle of water. "Callum texted you?" he asked without looking at me. I froze. "No," I said too quickly. He turned around. "Your phone lit up with his name." "It's nothing, just a comment." "Right," he said quietly. Then he opened his laptop again. I wanted him to react, to fight for me, to say something dramatic that proved he cared. Instead, he went back to typing. I hated that calm. I told him he was making everything worse by acting like I'd done something unforgivable. He said, "You don't have to do anything unforgivable for it to hurt." The room felt smaller after that. I went to the balcony just to breathe. Outside, the city lights flickered on one by one. My phone buzzed again. Callum texting a photo of the lake at sunset with the words "good times." I didn't answer, but I didn't delete it either. When I went back inside, Evan was gone from his desk. His chair was pushed in perfectly. On the table beside it was his phone, face down again. A small sticky note sat next to it. "Bring forms." I stared at it, confused. He didn't have any appointments that required forms. Later, as I was cleaning up, I found a USB drive taped under a folder labeled taxes. I almost laughed. Evan, the man who loses receipts weekly, now labeling things like an accountant. I didn't touch it, though. Something about it felt deliberate, like he'd left it there knowing I'd notice. Before bed, he asked if I was free this weekend. I said yes, expecting him to suggest dinner or a walk. He said, "Good. We should talk then." His tone wasn't angry, just final. I asked if it was serious. He said, "That depends on how honest you want to be." When he turned off the light, I lay awake staring at the ceiling, my phone face down on my chest. I could hear the faint hum of the fridge, the quiet rustle of papers from his desk. He was writing something again, methodical, precise. I thought about deleting the photo from my feed, maybe sending him a sweet text to break the tension, but pride got in the way. I told myself if he wanted peace, he could ask for it. He was the one turning this into something bigger than it was. Just before I drifted off, I heard the soft click of a drawer closing. Then, the faint beep of his phone alarm, setting something for the next morning. When I asked half asleep what he was doing, he said, "Preparing." I didn't ask for what. I didn't want to know. At work, I tried to pretend everything was normal, smiled at people, joined their jokes, even laughed when someone mentioned the lake photo again. I told them Evan was just private, that he didn't get how social media worked. They nodded, half listening, more interested in gossip than truth. That suited me fine. The less people thought, the easier it was to steer the story. By lunchtime, someone had tagged me in a post about throwback couples. There it was again, me and Callum by the lake, frozen in that easy laugh. I told myself it didn't matter. I was building a harmless image, fun, open, unbothered. Still, I felt a strange twist in my chest every time a notification popped up. When I got home that evening, the apartment was spotless. The air smelled faintly of cleaning spray, and Evan's laptop was open on the desk. A spreadsheet glowed on the screen, rows and columns, neat lines of numbers and short notes. Sat, Lake, post shared, comment threads. I blinked. For a moment I thought it was just his usual work habit. Then I saw my name in one of the cells. My stomach tightened. I asked what it was when he walked in. He looked at the screen, then at me, calm as ever. "Just keeping track," he said. "Of what?" "Things," he replied. I laughed, but it came out thin. "You're seriously making lists now?" He shrugged. "It helps me stay clear." "Clear about what?" He didn't answer. Instead, he closed the laptop, placed his phone beside it, and went to change. The click of the bedroom door echoed longer than it should have. Later, while he showered, I checked his phone. It wasn't locked. He never locks it. A thread caught my eye, saved as just a single emoji. Inside were short messages, all outgoing. Times, dates, and one-line notes like follow-up scheduled and file sent. No responses. Maybe it was a reminder app or something work-related, but it made my skin prickle. When he came back, I pretended to be scrolling social media. I mentioned that Callum was releasing new music soon. Evan said, "That's nice." No emotion, no sarcasm, just words. I said maybe we should all go see him play sometime. Evan said, "You should do what makes you happy." I thought that was permission. It felt like it. The next evening, Tess called saying a few of us were meeting for drinks. I told Evan I'd be home late. He just nodded. No questions. I hated that. It felt like he didn't care at all. At the bar, Callum was already there, guitar case leaning against the wall. He hugged me when I arrived, a little longer than friendly, and everyone saw. Tess made a teasing comment about old flames. I laughed it off. Evan would have rolled his eyes, but Evan wasn't there. The night got loud and messy. Someone filmed a short clip of Callum and me singing a song we used to play years ago. Nothing romantic, just nostalgia, but by the time I woke up the next morning, it had already been posted. The caption read, "Still the dream team." Evan didn't say a word about it. Not that day, not the next. He just moved through the apartment with quiet precision. I thought maybe he hadn't seen it, but deep down I knew better. On Wednesday, I noticed something else. A small USB drive on the kitchen counter labeled with the date. When I asked what it was, he said, "Backups." I said, "Of what?" He replied, "Everything important." That phrase stuck with me all day. At work, co-workers kept whispering. Apparently, the clip from the bar had circulated again, now stitched with the lake picture. One of my colleagues, Dana, showed it to me, saying it was kind of bold to mix past and present like that. I laughed and said, "People love drama." Inside, though, my hands were sweating. When I got home, Evan was in the kitchen, cutting vegetables in perfect steady motions. I told him people at work were overreacting. He said, "They're not the only ones." I told him I didn't deserve judgment for a song. He said, "It's never just a song." I slammed a cupboard, said I was tired of being treated like a criminal. He didn't raise his voice. He just said, "You can't keep acting like what you do in public doesn't count." "That's exactly what you're doing," I snapped, "sitting there with your little notes, pretending you're better than me." He looked at me for a long time, knife still in his hand, blade pointed harmlessly down. "I don't pretend," he said, "I just write things down." That calmness unnerved me more than anger ever could. Later that night, while he slept in the guest room, I went through his desk drawers. They were perfectly arranged. Folders labeled household, utilities, bank, and one unmarked. The unmarked one was locked. I rattled it quietly, then stopped. The sound felt like something breaking. The next morning, I found his coffee mug already washed and drying upside down beside mine, still stained. The difference irritated me so much I didn't even finish making breakfast. At work, Dana asked if everything was okay at home. She said I looked pale. I told her I was fine, just tired. She mentioned seeing Evan's sister comment on one of the posts, something about boundaries. I checked immediately. Mara had written, "Some people forget respect is also a choice." I deleted the comment. That evening, Evan came home late. He hung his jacket neatly, then asked, "Did you delete something today?" My throat tightened. "Why would you say that?" "Because it won't matter," he said simply. "The internet remembers everything." I hated how certain he sounded, like he knew the ending already. I spent the next few days trying to act normal again. Cooked dinner, texted him jokes, played music while cleaning. He responded politely, but never touched me. Not once. The silence between us stretched like glass. Clear, thin, waiting to shatter. One night, while folding laundry, I found an unfamiliar key on his ring. Small, silver, newer than the others. I asked where it was from. He said, "Storage." I said we didn't have storage. He said, "We do now." I laughed like it was funny, but the sound cracked halfway out. That weekend, Tess invited everyone to a small gathering at her place. I almost said no, but Evan told me to go. "It'll look better if you do," he said. That phrasing made my stomach twist. At the party, everyone was whispering before I arrived. Tess pulled me aside, saying maybe I should lay low for a bit because people were getting weird about the videos. I pretended not to care. "It's just gossip," I said. She looked unconvinced. Halfway through the night, Callum showed up. Everyone cheered. He hugged me again, too long, too familiar. Phones came out. I saw a flash and froze. Then I smiled, because what else could I do? Later, I checked my phone. Evan had texted, "Hope the crowd enjoys the show." That message chilled me. It wasn't jealous or angry, just factual, like he already knew what was happening. When I got home after midnight, he was awake at the table, papers spread neatly before him. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Sorting receipts." I said, "At 1 a.m. He said, "It's quiet now." I asked why he was being so cold. He said, "I'm not. I'm being careful." I wanted to scream. I wanted him to fight, to argue, to break the silence. But all he did was collect, organize, and label, like he was archiving our entire life for inspection. When I went to bed, I noticed the faint blue glow of his laptop still on in the other room. A progress bar on the screen read, "File uploaded successfully." For the first time, I couldn't fall asleep. The sound of the keyboard tapping through the walls felt like a clock, counting down to something I didn't understand yet. I told myself he was bluffing, that all this precision was just his way of sulking. I didn't realize he was building something real, something that would outlast every excuse I had left. Sunday started like any other, sunlight spilling through the curtains, the quiet smell of coffee already drifting from the kitchen. Evan was sitting at the table, scrolling through his phone like nothing was wrong. I stood there for a moment, waiting for him to say something, but he didn't even look up. I said good morning, and he just nodded. That calm politeness had started to feel like a punishment. I tried to start a normal conversation. I asked if he wanted to visit my mum later, since she'd been asking about him. He said he had work to finish. I told him it was Sunday. He said, "Deadlines don't wait for weekends." That wasn't true. His projects rarely needed weekend hours. I could tell he was lying, but he said it so gently that I didn't know how to argue. By afternoon, my mother called to remind me about the family dinner we'd planned with Evan's parents. I thought about cancelling, but it felt like running away would only make things worse. Maybe if we showed up together, everyone would stop whispering. I told Evan he didn't have a choice. We were going. He looked at me for a long time, then said, "All right." No fight. No protest. Just that one word. We drove in silence. I kept glancing at him, waiting for a crack in the mask. He didn't give me one. His face was calm, almost peaceful. When we reached the restaurant, his parents were already there, along with my mum and his sister Mara. The air felt tense before I even sat down. My mother greeted him too cheerfully, like she was trying to prove something. "Evan, you look well. Busy as always, I bet." He smiled politely, trying to be. Mara gave me a polite nod, but didn't say much. I tried to smile back, pretending everything was fine. We ordered food, and for a while, the table was filled with normal conversation. Evan's father talked about work, my mum complimented the decor, and I started to think maybe this dinner could reset everything. Then the waitress brought drinks, and my mum decided to mention the photo. "You two caused quite the stir online," she said, laughing. "That lake picture, Liora, you looked beautiful. Everyone said you and your ex have such natural chemistry." The table went silent. I could feel every pair of eyes shift toward me. Evan didn't move, just placed his napkin neatly beside his plate. "It was just a joke," I said quickly. "People exaggerate." Mara's voice was quiet but firm. "Some jokes don't look like jokes to strangers." I turned toward her. "What's that supposed to mean?" She didn't answer right away. "It means when you share something like that, you're not just sharing about yourself, you're sharing about him too." I laughed, sharper than I meant to. "So now I can't even post a picture without asking permission?" Evan's mother cleared her throat softly, trying to calm things down. "We're not saying that, dear. It's just, well, people talk." "That's their problem," I said. Evan finally spoke. "No, it's not." His tone was soft, but it cut through the noise. "It's ours now." The waitress returned with plates, breaking the silence for a moment. I focused on cutting my food, pretending I wasn't shaking inside. My mother shot me a sympathetic look as if to say, "You see how dramatic he's being?" I wanted to believe her. Halfway through dinner, Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen and excused himself. He stepped outside, leaving his jacket draped over the chair. A few minutes later, a waitress came by with a small envelope in her hand. "A delivery for Mr. Reese," she said. I frowned, reaching for it, but Mara stopped me. "Better leave it for him," she said quietly. Something about her tone made my stomach twist. When Evan came back, he thanked the waitress and slid the envelope into his pocket without opening it. "Just a delivery confirmation," he said when I asked. I wanted to press him, but the look in his eyes told me not to. The rest of the dinner was torture. My mom kept trying to fill the silence with chatter about the weather. Evan's father kept checking his watch. I pushed food around my plate, wishing the floor would swallow me. When the check came, Evan stood and paid before anyone could argue. On the drive home, I tried to talk, to fix the air between us. "I didn't mean to make you look bad," I said. He kept his eyes on the road. "You didn't make me look bad. You made yourself look busy." "Busy?" he nodded. "Always performing." "That's not fair," I said. "I just like being open." He sighed quietly. "You call it open. I call it exposed." We didn't speak again until we were parked. When I reached for the door handle, he said, "Do you ever stop to think what all of this looks like from outside?" I hesitated. "You mean from your family's point of view?" "I mean from mine," he said. His calmness made me feel small. I wanted to shout, to make him match my energy, but he just stared straight ahead, his fingers resting lightly on the steering wheel. Inside, the apartment felt colder than usual. The lights were dim, the air too still. Evan went to his desk and opened a folder labeled Household. He started sorting through papers without a word. I asked what he was doing. He said, "Filing things properly." I tried to joke, said he was turning into an accountant. He didn't laugh. I poured myself a glass of wine, hoping it would loosen the tension. "You know," I said, "you're allowed to be angry. It's better than this silence." He closed the folder slowly and looked at me. "I'm not angry," he said. "I'm just finished pretending it doesn't matter." That line lingered long after he went to bed. The next morning, I woke to find him already gone again. The chair where he'd sat the night before was empty, the surface spotless. On the counter were 2 mugs, his washed, mine half full and sticky. Next to them was a neatly folded note. Dinner was useful. Useful. Who even talks like that? I tore it up and tossed it in the trash. I called my mother, ranting about how cold he was being. She said he just needed time. Men don't like feeling humiliated, she reminded me. He'll come around once he realizes you didn't mean anything by it. I wanted to believe her, but when I checked social media later, I saw that someone had tagged me again, another post, this time from the restaurant. Someone had taken a picture of our table captioned, "Awkward dinner." The photo wasn't clear, but Evan's face was visible, expressionless as ever. The comments were cruel. I deleted the tag immediately, but it didn't help. By evening, I couldn't take the silence anymore. When Evan got home, I demanded we talk. "I'm tired of walking on eggshells," I said. "If you're mad, say it." He took off his coat, hung it carefully and said, "I'm not mad, I'm preparing." "For what?" He met my eyes. "To handle this properly." The way he said properly made my chest tighten. It sounded calm, final, like a closing door. I told him he was being cryptic. He said, "You'll understand soon." That night I couldn't sleep. I sat on the balcony, watching the lights of the city flicker, while his steady breathing came from the guest room. A soft beep sounded once, his phone alarm again. Some reminder, some invisible schedule I wasn't part of. I told myself he wouldn't actually do anything. He wasn't the type. He was quiet, decent, predictable. But as I sat there, staring at that perfectly organized apartment and the neat stack of labeled folders on his desk, I started to wonder if maybe predictability wasn't safety after all. Maybe it was warning. When I finally went to bed, I could still smell the faint trace of toner from his printer. It was like the air itself was keeping records, even while I tried to sleep. Monday morning, I woke to the sound of drawers closing. Evan was already dressed, crisp shirt, tie perfectly straight, his movements quiet and exact. I asked where he was going so early. He said, "Just errands." I told him it was barely 7. He said, "That's when the office is open." I laughed, thinking he was joking, but his expression didn't change. When the door closed behind him, the apartment felt too still. I wandered into the kitchen and saw another sticky note beside the sink. "Paper drop, 9, Souths." I frowned. He'd been leaving little notes everywhere lately, like breadcrumbs. They meant nothing and everything all at once. By noon, I couldn't stand the waiting. I texted him to ask if he'd be home for dinner. He replied hours later. Probably late. No emoji, no warmth. I wanted to throw my phone across the room. I met Tess that evening at a small cafe downtown. I needed someone to agree with me again, to make me feel right. She ordered wine and asked how things were. I said Evan was acting like a ghost. She asked if I'd talked to him. I said I'd tried, but he'd gone all cold and formal, like he was preparing for a trial I didn't know about. She said maybe I should post something light-hearted to remind people I wasn't taking it too seriously. So I did. I uploaded a photo from last summer, Evan and me at a fair, cotton candy in hand, both smiling. The caption read, "Still sweet after all this time." Within minutes, the comments started. A few people asked if we were still together. One even said, "Guess the lake drama was nothing after all." I liked that one. I wanted Evan to see it, to know I was still shaping the story. When I got home, his car was in the driveway, lights off inside. I walked in and found him sitting on the couch, reading something on his laptop. "You saw my post?" I asked, trying to sound casual. He looked up slowly. "Yes." "Well?" I said. "See, I'm trying." He closed the laptop and said, "Trying to convince who?" I opened my mouth but couldn't answer. He stood, walked past me to the kitchen, and started rinsing his cup. "You're not fixing anything," he said quietly. "You're performing." Performing for what? I snapped. For people who don't have to live here, he said. I followed him down the hall. You keep talking like you're collecting evidence for something. What are you planning? He paused, drying his hands. I'm planning to stop being the villain in your story. That line stunned me. I said he was being dramatic, that he was twisting everything. He said, You call everything dramatic when you don't want to face it. The calm in his voice frightened me. I told him, if he was going to end things, he could at least do it like an adult instead of this quiet punishment. He looked straight at me and said, Don't worry, I'll handle it properly. Properly. That word again, heavy and final. I didn't sleep much that night. I kept replaying every detail of his tone, every little phrase he'd repeated lately. Useful, follow-up, properly. It all sounded like part of a script I wasn't allowed to read. Around 2 a.m, I went into the guest room. He wasn't there. His side of the bed was neatly made. The window was open, the curtain moving gently in the breeze. On the desk beside the bed, his phone screen glowed faintly. Another calendar reminder blinked on the display. Meeting, 8:15. I closed the door quietly and went back to bed, trying not to let my mind race. The next morning, he was gone again, but his closet looked emptier. A few hangers were bare, the drawer where he kept his watch box half open. I told myself he was just reorganizing. He loved reorganizing. Later that day, I went to see my mother. I needed someone to tell me this wasn't spiraling. She poured coffee and said, Men like him don't leave, Liora. They sulk, then forgive. I nodded, though I wasn't convinced. She asked if I'd called him. I said no, he'd call when he wanted to talk. She smiled. Good girl, let him chase you. When I got home, his car was back. My heart jumped. I walked in, rehearsing something warm, maybe a joke to break the ice. But he wasn't in the living room. The sound of a shredder hummed from down the hall. Evan, I said, stepping closer. He was in the office, calm as always, feeding papers into the shredder. A stack of duplicates sat beside him. Old bills, receipts, maybe letters. He looked up and said, I'm clearing out what doesn't matter anymore. I stared at the pile. You mean us? He shook his head. No, just the noise. The shredder stopped, and he unplugged it neatly. I asked what he planned to do with the rest. He said, Archive it. That word made my skin prickle. You make it sound like our life is a case file. He smiled faintly. Isn't that how you've treated it? Every moment public, every argument rehearsed. I told him he was cruel. He said, Cruel would be letting this continue. He stood, packed a small folder into his bag, and said, Tomorrow's the last time we'll have to discuss this. I followed him to the door. Discuss what? He looked at me, eyes steady, no anger left. Everything. Properly. He left before I could stop him. That night, I called Tess again. She said I sounded paranoid. He's bluffing, Liora, she said. Guys like him just want to scare you into apologizing. I laughed weakly, pretending to believe her. When I hung up, the apartment was completely quiet. I walked through each room like I was searching for something missing. The framed photo from our fair trip was gone from the shelf. Only a faint rectangle of clean wall remained where it used to hang. I checked his desk drawers again. Most were empty now except one, which held a single USB drive labeled with today's date. I picked it up, then put it back. Something told me not to look. Before bed, I scrolled through my phone again. The posts, the comments, the messages, all still there, glowing. I wondered if he had copies of them too. At exactly midnight, a soft tone buzzed from my phone, a message from Evan. Just one line. You'll understand soon. I stared at it for a long time, unsure whether to reply. Finally, I typed, If this is about control, you're not winning. He didn't answer. I couldn't sleep. I kept expecting to hear his key in the lock, his footsteps returning to make peace. But morning came, pale and quiet, and he was still gone. The alarm on his side of the bed went off at 7 Augs, flashing a new reminder. Paper delivery. Courthouse, 9:15. My throat tightened. I sat up, trying to breathe. I wanted to tell myself it was just another errand, but the word courthouse stared back at me, glowing on the screen. I turned off the alarm, placed the phone face down, and whispered to the empty room. He wouldn't. But even as I said it, I wasn't sure anymore. Evan barely looked at me that morning. He was dressed early, calm, composed, too calm. I asked where he was going, and he said, "Out for errands." When I asked what kind, he said, "The kind that finish things." I tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. After he left, I saw another one of his notes stuck to the counter, paper drop, 9 Aund. The handwriting was so neat it made me angry. Who plans their mornings like that? I wanted to rip it up but left it there, like proof of how dramatic he was being. That evening, when he came home, I asked if we could talk. He said, "We will soon." I asked if he was angry. He said, "No, I'm preparing." The words made my chest tighten. I told him he was acting like I'd done something unforgivable. He said quietly, "You keep calling it something when it's everything." Later, as he packed papers into a folder, I tried one last time to make him soften. I said, "You don't have to turn this into some legal mess." He paused, looked at me carefully, and said, "It already is one." Then he added, calm as ever, "Tomorrow I'll handle it properly." And he walked out.